first of all, welcome to everyone. It's a wonderful day today with having people from all around the world, basically. As you noticed from the last newsletter, our theme this month has been all about COP26, and this is following through in our meeting today. Where's my thing gone? So today I'll do a welcome to set the scene, and then we'll move into our guest speaker today, Dr. Diane Kraal, and we'll move through the agenda as we go. But I'll just set the scene. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone and acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in all the places that we are meeting from today, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This picture is actually my office where I work, and it's just above the door to the entrance. And it was painted by an Aboriginal prisoner who had a story that went with it. And he says, animals in the painting represent air, land and sea. They've suffered and are still suffering due to our country not being looked after and respected. Heal country and country will heal us. Thought that was lovely. I thought I'd share it with you today. Joining the dots, just sort of get some context for those that haven't been with us before. We think of Zonta Says Now as a steam train. So at the beginning, we've got the greenhouse gas emissions that lead to global warming, that lead to extreme weather events, that lead to societal disruption, where inequalities are magnified. So we're at risk of losing the gains in gender equality made over the last century. So we're working at both ends of the train. So we're ramping up all of Zonta's activities today so we can close the gender gap before the social disruption, I'll just let someone else in, caused by runaway global warming makes it impossible to do so. So that's the gender equality of what we do. And we also advocate to stop greenhouse gas emissions and slow down global warming. And that's our climate action element. And we have our 5-point framework that we use. We gather facts, reduce emissions, add our voice, advocate and collaborate. And as Mary Crooks, one of the guest speakers, our District 23 conference, put it the other day, if we don't stop the planet burning, we can forget about gender equity. So she summed it up, I think. Australia does not have a good record with the Sustainable Development Goals in regard to climate action. And on the latest scorecard, we were last out of 193 countries, which is what prompted that comedian to pay for those billboards in Glasgow for COP, where he has Australia net zero by 2300. And so I thought that was quite funny. So, but this highlights the fact that we do have COP26, which has the 4 goals that I outlined in the newsletter. So securing that net zero to keep below 1.5, and that's got more ambitious targets, as well as phasing out coal, stopping deforestation, speeding up the switch to electric vehicles, which is where Dr. Diane Kraal comes in today, and encouraging renewables. We're also looking the goals for COP26 to adapt to protect communities and natural habitats. And Vicki and Bronwen have worked in this space and currently about restoring ecosystems and building defences and warning systems and resilient infrastructure, etc. With regards to mobilising finance, in Zonta Says Now, we don't really have a few $1 billion to help out on that one. So we can't do a lot there. But working together to deliver, we're not part of finalising the rules for the Paris Agreement, but we do have a place in helping to accelerate climate action through collaboration. So that just wanted to set the scene before I hand over to Suzanne Lees to introduce Dr. Diane Kraal. I'll come off screen share so that you can do that. And I just want to make sure that I have advanced multiple, yeah, okay. So over to you, Sue.
All right, thank you. So Diane works for Monash Business School and is a senior lecturer in the area of business law and taxation. So Diane is involved with the Monash Energy Institute and focuses on energy justice, which is examining and trying to balance the competing areas of economy, politics and environment in terms of energy. Currently, Diane has been doing research into how taxation change could benefit the uptake of electrical vehicles in fleets. And today she's going to talk to us about that research and where it goes from now. But also, Diane is going to talk to us about COPs. She has been to 2 COPs. So it will be really interesting to hear her experience and what is the value of these meetings. And I have to tell you that Diane is a person who is not only involved in issues of environmental concern, the climate, the environment professionally, she's also somebody who lives it. So locally, she has been very involved, instrumental in one of the local environment groups, and in her own lifestyle, she's very sustainable. So I'd like to thank Diane for coming today. It's a great pleasure to actually have you with us today. So I'll hand over to you.
Good, thanks very much, Sue. And what I'll do, I'll just first of all share my screen. And is that right? Everyone see it? No. Yes? Yep. Great. Okay, so look, I've got 2 sets of slides, but I realise that I'm only speaking for 20 minutes, so I'll definitely keep in within that time frame, maybe 10 minutes on the COP and 10 minutes on my research to do with electric vehicles. So first of all, I just wanted to share with you my experience in going along to 2 COPs, but in the context of the big COP26 coming up in Glasgow. So, and I'll just move this across a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to give you an overview here, and I might even just put my timer on just so I don't go over and that I keep the time. So first of all, I'll be covering the workings and importance of a UN climate change conference and the benefits, not only to me, but to people like yourselves, of engaging with such a conference. So first of all, some insights. So I went along to the COP in 2018 in Katowice in Poland, as well as the 2019 COP in Madrid. And of course, the one in 2020 was cancelled, and I was planning to go along with Monash to the one in Glasgow, but that simply hasn't eventuated. But we will certainly be engaging virtually with that particular conference. So what does COP mean? It's all about the community of partners. And if you can think of COP in terms of 3 concentric circles. So on the outer circle, we have what's called the constituencies. And that's where groups such as people from Monash Uni, people from Zonta, people from Greenpeace, people from the World Wildlife Fund, there's a whole lot of these constituencies that can apply and go along to these COPs. And the idea is that these grassroots organisations, and the university's being, considered a grassroots organisation, can go along and discuss a range of issues to inform the final discussions by government bodies. So that's the outer core. If we go one step in, what we've got is government-sponsored pavilions. So again, the COPs are big. There's thousands of people that go along. It's a huge undertaking, and various countries set up pavilions to demonstrate their work through industry or through government in the context of climate change innovation. And unfortunately, Australia has never had a pavilion at one of these COPs, but a range of countries have. You've got even China's had a pavilion, New Zealand in collaboration with various Pacific islands, India Japan. There's a whole range of countries with pavilions, UK, demonstrating their innovations, their technological innovations with regard to climate change. And at the heart and at the centre of the COP are the government-to-government negotiations. And that's where finally Scott Morrison has decided to go along to these very important collaborations. So what are these government-to-government discussions about? And I understand Zonta will have observer status, and that means a representative from Zonta will be able to sit in and view, not participate, because it's just observer status, these negotiations over the articles in the Paris Agreement. So there's a whole range of articles, and right up until 2019, the sticking point was Article 6. So just to give you a flavour of the sticking points, so Article 6.2 was about carbon emission reductions, or the nationally determined contributions. So Australia is supposed to make a contribution to the overall global reduction in carbon emissions. And that's what we need to do, and that's what we haven't done, because we're arguing around the periphery about how to measure these contributions by Australia. There's a double counting issue. Sometimes countries use, for instance, in other countries, emissions reductions, say from Indonesia, and claim them as their own, so double counting. So there have been, so we're still arguing, countries are still arguing about Article 6. That'll continue at the COP later in November. And three countries that stood out in COP 2019 were the US under Trump, Brazil, and unfortunately Australia. So there's a lot of countries wanting to come together, but three countries in particular made themselves a little bit obvious in not coming to the party when discussing particularly Article 6. But going on to more kind of positive things, Monash University put out a delegation, or put together a delegation. There was 18 of us in the 2019 COP. We had students, so we had master's students, PhD students come along, and we encouraged them to go along to the various side events and give presentations, and that went really, really well. For university researchers like myself that were part of the Monash delegation, the idea was to tap into the latest thinking about climate change and also collaborate. So make contact with other organisations for research collaboration. And so, whereas us grassroots participants may not have been there in the country-to-country negotiations, there were plenty of opportunities for us to participate. And that was the great thing about COP. The great thing about COP is the opportunities for people to participate. And even in this year of COVID, there's still virtual participation available. We had a booth at the COP both in 2018, 2019, and that was great fun. Lots of interest there. There were probably over 200 booths over the 2 weeks, and we had to we had a booth for a week, and then we had to share it with someone else. So there was a huge demand, to set up and run booths, but that was great fun. And finally, my takeaway from the 2019 COP was to consider, what area of research I might pursue as a result of all my observations from the 2019 COP. And I thought, okay, I decided to look at water and climate change as a research agenda item. And I made contact with other like-minded researchers. So there was Lisa, Rob and Jagdeep. They were researchers from University of South Australia, University of Auckland and University of, I'm just trying to think, Canterbury, I think it was. So we basically looked at tax as a solution for water, irrigation and scarcity, quality and sustainability. And we had case studies looking at the Murray-Darling Basin here in Australia, the Tasmanian irrigation system, and the irrigation system in Canterbury, New Zealand. So that's all I really want to say about the COP. So I'll take a couple of questions before going on to my electric vehicles research. Anyone wants to ask questions, or we can save them till the end?
I think we'll probably save the questions until the end. What do you reckon? Be good?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, no problem. So
Okay,
we'll keep going. So I'll just bring up the second set of slides. And I think everyone can see them there. All right, so again, kind of keeping to the 10 minutes that I've been allocated. So this particular project is a follow-on from my water project, and it's a big project. It's worth about $200,000, and it's part of the Race for 2030 CRC Research Centre. So RACE is the acronym for Reliable, Affordable, Clean Energy. I'm involved in a fast-track project. So basically, we have to get out our report in 6 months. So we started earlier this year, and we have to finish by November. So the project is looking at business fleets and encouraging the uptake of battery electric vehicle in business fleets. And the idea is to consider taxation changes to support home charging from the grid and affordability. So what's all this about? Okay, so because I'm with the Monash Business School, it had to be a business problem, and that was the RACE mandate. We had to try and research a business problem. More on that in a moment. I'll be sharing with you the approach to the research and our outputs, which are generally on track. They'll be out in November this year. So the business problem is concerning the uptake of battery electric vehicles. And so we're looking at business fleets because they are accepted generally as an effective pathway for early adoption of battery electric vehicles. And this is in the literature and generally accepted that the bulk of the cars on the roads in Australia, and I'm talking light passenger vehicles and vans, are business fleet cars. But the problem is the uptake of battery electric vehicles in business fleets is low due to the low levels of fleet charging infrastructure. This is infrastructure at site, and the affordability of BEVs. They are expensive. So our question is, can taxation changes provide a solution to the cost of charging infrastructure for fleets as well as affordability? So there's two parts to the problem that we're looking at. So the first limb of the problem are the charging infrastructure facilities. They're low in various business fleets around Australia. However, so far research has found that 47% of fleet vehicles are home charged. But unfortunately, when someone drives their fleet car home, they're basically subject to fringe benefits tax. So fringe benefits tax is a barrier to home charging of fleet cars if they were to be battery electric vehicles. So we're considering the business use of individual fleet employees home for charging as a stopgap measure until business builds up charging infrastructure back at the business site. So our project's investigating, first of all, how fringe benefits tax currently discourages home charging of battery electric vehicles, and how we could change fringe benefits tax to preference battery electric vehicles over the lower priced internal combustion engine cars. So we're looking at a case study, for instance, of a Kona, $60,000 compared to a comparable petrol diesel car, which is $30,000. So there's almost a $30,000 price differential there. And also we're looking at how income tax changes could encourage home charging. So the second limb of the project is to look at affordability, and can there be subsidies or grants to lower home charging costs? What about income tax concessions for affordability to incentivise the uptake of battery electric vehicles? So we're putting up these proposed tax changes and their effect on total cost of ownership of a car. And that's what fleet managers look at. They look at the capital cost of a car, 60,000 compared to 30,000. And they also look at the operating costs. And together it's called total cost of ownership. And that's why, again, we've selected business fleets to look at, because they're rational. They look at the cost as opposed to consumers that look at colour, that look at, whether they're leather seats. Business looks at the cost, and that's why we've selected to look at business fleets, because number one, they're rational, and number two, the bulk of the vehicles out on the road are fleet vehicles. So we'll make an impact if we can get our results accepted and up and running. So how are we going to do this? So as researchers, obviously one of the things we do is look at the literature, what's been done previously in this space, because there's no point in replicating work that's already been done. And if work has been done of a similar nature, is there a gap? Can we make a contribution to what's already out there, but contribute something unique? And so, for instance, we're looking at the literature on the suitability of private homes for smart charging, access to lower energy tariffs for battery electric vehicle charging, that sort of thing. Now, if you look at this little table here, it just gives you a snapshot of how far behind we are in Australia. So the leaders are Norway, the Netherlands, Germany, and the UK. I've just picked four countries as an example, okay? Populations there, it's roughly comparable. Okay, in terms of the average grams of CO2 per kilometre from vehicles, Norway leads at 59.9 grams of CO2 per kilometre, and we've got 185. There's a huge difference. Even compared to the UK, that are doing really well, they emit 127.7 grams per kilometre for their light vehicle cars, and we're 185. In terms of GDP per capita, we're comparable. Norway's up there because of the oil and gas revenue that they've managed to save in their future fund. And so all of that the government's put aside to address climate change and things such as getting electric vehicles on the road. So Norway are the leaders, but they're unique. But that doesn't mean to say Australia compared to the Netherlands, Germany or the UK can't get up there, but we are way behind at this point. In terms of our methods, how we're going to go about this research, first of all, we've undertaken what we call qualitative interviews. And we've conducted interviews of ASX-listed companies and their fleet managers, as well as local councils, statutory authorities, and private companies. And so we've prepared an interview instrument to try and elicit information from them on their attitudes to battery electric vehicles. And the uptake in fleets in Australia is very, very low, hardly any, as well as problems with infrastructure. So we've already conducted about 160 hours of interviews, and we've generated about 140 pages of text from the interview. So we're conducting this qualitative research. It's called inductive research, as opposed to the deductive nature of quantitative research, where answers to hypotheses lead to claims in the nature of statistical generalizations about broader populations. So by contrast, the interview emphasis is on gathering insights from the perspective of those with experience in fleet management. And these interviews will aim to build an understanding of fleet managers' perceptions of barriers in the uptake of battery electric vehicles in their fleet. We'll also be conducting research through quantitative surveys, so we'll be using quantitative as well as qualitative methods. So the quantitative surveys will be surveying fleet employers, a whole range of them, maybe up to 200, as well as fleet employees. In terms of our outputs, apart from the normal executive summary, if we just concentrate on the recommendations here, the focus will be on making recommendations to fringe benefits tax that will be short-term changes, maybe that can be implemented within the year. Just turn off my phone. As well as looking at income tax changes in the short term. We'll also be putting up longer term fringe benefits tax and income tax reforms based on what's happening overseas, because Europe seems to be, Europe is does represent the body of leading countries in this space. So I don't want to go on too much longer. I'll just leave it there and I'll stop sharing and I'll hand back to Carol.
Thanks, Diane. It's really good to get an appreciation of where you're at. I actually work in transport in WA, and so this is an area that's quite close to my heart. And because fleets make up, what, 50% of the vehicles or something, so it's quite a big market. And so I know that in WA we have, I mean, most states I think have a problem with a duck curve, where we have so much power is produced by solar energy during the day that we're looking for ways to equalise the grid by taking off more power during the time when we've got more solar power on board. Is there any opportunity within the FPT system to encourage that the grid stabilisation and having that rewarded through something through the fringe benefit tax and charging with the fleets during the day where it's possible to do so?
Yeah, no, I must say the trend overseas from the literature is people typically drive their cars home at night and charge them at home, and that's what the literature shows. But yeah, when people do drive their cars home, the best way to charge is through using a smart meter. So in a lot of states, there are better tariffs, from 10 o'clock at night. So typically people drive their cars home and just plug them in at 6 o'clock, where you get the higher tariff. So if you do use something like a smart meter, you can tap into that lower tariff, and that's where fringe benefits tax comes in. So if you're driving a fleet car home and plugging it in, and you've got an employer-provided smart charger, you have to pay tax on that, 47%, it's huge. But that's one of our recommendations, that fringe benefits tax should not apply to smart chargers for fleet vehicles charged at home. That
would be brilliant if that came off. Be a good incentive for the uptake. Did anyone else have any other questions for Diane?
Yes, please. Carol, Janice here.
Yes,
two questions actually. The table in slide 6, does that grams per kilometre take into account how the electricity for the electric vehicles is generated, fossil fuels, nuclear or renewables, or is it?
No, it's CO2 emissions, grams of CO2 per kilometre. And so the reason why it's so low in Norway is because of their high uptake of battery electric vehicles.
Right, okay. But I was just thinking, does that table take into account the CO2 emissions from the manner in which the electricity is generated or not? Or is that too complicated?
No. Tailpipe emissions, no. So
okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Emissions, and the second question was really whether what's going to happen to your report and recommendations I mean, you'll publish it. Will it only go to the academic community, or do you intend to send it out to think tanks, the political class, politicians, bureaucrats, etc.?
Yes, and that's part of being part of the CRC, the race CRC, that we do share our work with the wider community. And we're on target to get that report out into November. And we've specifically put in some short-term targets for fringe benefits tax and income tax in order to get them taken up. We know currently the policy is technology, not taxes. That's been made quite clear. So that's why we're a little bit surprised that our research got up, because it's 50% Commonwealth funded, because our slogan is technology and taxes. So, but in answer to your question, yes, we will certainly be sharing it with people other than academics, and the report is written in a style that will be accessible to a range of people, and not just the academic community.
Thanks very much, Diane. That's great.
Any other questions that people may have?
I have.
Yes, sir.
So, Diane, how useful, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but how useful is it Scott Morrison going to Glasgow, which he should, but without us having a carbon tax? Like, is there any way that we're really going to get there if we don't have a carbon tax?
No, I think it's really important now that Scott Morrison has finally made the decision to go to Glasgow. I think it's such an important global event. And I can tell you what, in 2019 at the COP in Madrid, it was so embarrassing being an Australian, because the week I was there, Australia was awarded, Fossil of the Week. Yeah. I'm kind of used to travelling overseas and being very proud of being an Australian, but the developments over the climate change, or the non-developments over Australia's climate change policy, has been a real embarrassment. And Scott Morrison needs to be there and listen to what other people have got to say on the matter, even though he says that, we make our own decisions. I think the message has finally got through that we have to have a climate change policy that commits to net zero by 2050. And actually, the real problem is 2030. 2050 is a nice little stepping stone, but if you want to be serious, it's 2030.
Any other questions that were there? Yes, Sheila.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, good. Couldn't tell how, yeah. Anyway, I have actually two quick questions, Diane, and it involves the US. I think you had mentioned that at that conference that you were out early this year, the US did not attend? Yeah,
this is the Madrid 2019. So Nancy Pelosi was there, but Trump wasn't.
You really needed Trump. Okay. Was Zonta represented at all?
No? I'm not sure. There was a lot of organisations, a lot of grassroots organisations that were given observer status. And it was just a matter of applying.
Okay. Yeah. So my last question is, the SDGs that you mentioned were originated by the UN, and it's specific to what you're talking about. I've been taking notes rapidly. I hope I can remember the questions.
Yeah, well, look, I'm familiar with the SDGs, but we haven't actually specifically identified one. It's in. I'm sure there's one on energy, and so RACE is all about reliable, affordable, clean energy. So we haven't kind of isolated one of them, but certainly energy is one of the SDGs.
Okay, I'll follow that up and respond to see where it's actually originated. Okay, thank you.
Were there any other questions? Any other questions there?
No, I just make an observation, before Diane, when Diane started talking about this research, I had not realised that there were as many fleet vehicles around. And I have been thinking that it may actually have another effect as well if we can actually get more electric fleet vehicles on the roads, as well as helping the environment. It may also help the uptake of electric vehicles, in that the more people see things, the more they get comfortable with them being there. And in Australia, that seems to be one of our problems. We don't like to be the first, even though we're actually good at developing things. We have this hesitation.
I'm not quite sure about that. One of the things we found in the interviews, and the ASX companies were very good, and believe it or not, the local councils were very good. And we interviewed a range of councils around Australia, including, WA. And what they said was, particularly in the utility class, how the tradies got their utes, there is not a BEV that is fit for purpose. And what they all said, what they all said was, if there was a ute that was fit for purpose, in terms of it being a battery electric vehicle, they'd buy it. And price would be one of the considerations, but with business, it's fit for purpose. And I said to them, well, what are they doing in Europe? There must be tradesmen in Europe. What do they drive? And apparently in Europe, they drive more vans than utes. So it seems to be an Australian cultural thing, the tradies' utes. At this point, it'd be very hard to get tradespeople out of their utes. If they were happy to accept a battery electric vehicle in the form of a van, we'd be well on our way from tomorrow. So there's this cultural marketing type barrier. And don't forget, Australia is a bit of a dumping ground for dirty vehicles at this point.
Yes.
Europe doesn't want them, so they're dumping them in Australia at quite an inflated price, I must add, because of this cultural thing about utes.
Can I comment also on Suzanne's query? I mean, it's not just about making people more aware of electric vehicles. There is actually a significant unmet demand for electric vehicles in Australia. The range of electric vehicles that's available is very small, and they're all very expensive. And so if fleets start taking up electric vehicles, then it might improve the range of electric vehicles available to the wider population. And the second point about utes is, it's my understanding in that, in the United States, they call them pickups, and that there are significant developments regarding electric pickups in the United States. So it's not just that, that it's not that you can't make them, it's just that our traditional suppliers maybe haven't thought of producing them in Australia because, they say there's no demand, but that's because there's not enough of them. So it becomes a sort of vicious circle rather than a virtuous circle.
I must say the sort of utes that our tradesmen in Australia buy are quite different from the utes that I've observed in the US. The US are super big utes. But we're a small market. So again, the European manufacturers, they've got no motivation to design a ute that's battery electric. So it's not so much that the business wants these cars, but we're not being supplied them, again, because of government policy. There has to be not only taxation change, but regulatory change in terms of CO2 emissions. So at the moment in Victoria, we've got a road user tax on battery electric vehicles. To my way of thinking, there should be a road user tax on petrol diesel vehicles. But people know politically that's not going to happen today, but that is what's happening in Europe. The Europeans have really, for a number of years now, I'm talking 15 years this has been happening in Europe, that they've progressively built up policies to get petrol diesel cars off the road, and certainly in Norway, the sale of petrol diesel cars is going to be banned from 2025, and in the UK by 2030. So we are so far behind, and it's government policy.
Well, I think that's given us a lot of pause for thought there, Diane. I mean, we want to have improved emission requirements in Australia and better fuel efficiencies, and all the taxation things all add to that picture to help with the uptake of EVs, which is a great thing to move along with. We really appreciate you coming along to highlight those things for us today. Now we're going to hand over to Vicki Carman-Brown. Now, Vicki is the Area 5 Director based in Tasmania. She's a very active Zontian, and if you go trawling on the internet, you find out all sorts of things. And she does lots of things within her club, like we all do. But also, she was inducted into the Tasmanian Honour Roll of women to honour her outstanding contribution to the state. So I just thought I'd just let your light from under your bushel there a bit, Vicki. And I'm going to unshare my screen now so that you have the floor to tell us about your climate journey.
Thank you, Carol. Can I make a correction there? I wasn't personally inducted into the Tasmanian Honour Roll of Women. It was the Area 5 of the District 23
Good.
District 23. So Area 5 clubs were inducted into the Tasmanian Honour Roll of Women. So, yeah.
Thank you for the correction. That's wonderful. Thank you.
That's fine. And I might add that after Diane's amazing presentation, mine is such a modest, personal grassroots journey. It's going to tumble us all way down to literally that level. So bear with me. Mine is literally just grassroots. And my personal journey really, though, has happened over 55 years. So I hope I can sort of condense it enough in 10 minutes, Carol. But I grew up in Hobart between the beautiful mountain of Kunyani and the river, and it was probably one of the most idyllic sort of childhoods that you could imagine. And I always remember diving in the beautiful kelp forests with the beautiful weedy sea dragons and so on, which sadly have gone already in that area because of warming seas and climate change. So what I grew up when I experienced that, and it was like diving through a magnificent colonnade ballroom of this majestic kelp. So that's another reason I fight for what I do. I'm been politically and socially active since 15, and I was involved in the campaign to save Lake Pedder. I don't know if any of you know about that, and I apologise if you don't. But this delightful, magnificent lake in southwest Tasmania, I haven't got a slide shot of it, but it was absolutely, it's one of the most unique in the world. It's not because I'm Tasmanian, but it is unique in the world. And it was flooded for hydroelectrical reasons. But I'll come back to that because that will form the ending of my, my little speech. So I've been aware of environmental factors, human rights, including gender equality issues, throughout my whole life. So that's the formation of it sort of at that level. And my first employment was as a lab technician working in aquaculture, which was the new name for it, but with a lot of research on crayfish, scallops and abalone here in Tasmania. And 2 years later, I travelled to the mainland, ending up in the Northern Territory, where I was employed at the Arid Zone Research Institute outside of Alice Springs, where we were growing oranges in the desert, and there was dingo management and bacteriological analysis for the Alice Springs Hospital. And that's what I was involved with. So I was moving around in a lot of laboratory capacities over the time. After a year, I returned to Tasmania and was employed at a College of Advanced Education on a mountain near Hobart, where I helped with student support services because I was really a bit of a techie as well as a lab techie. So, and I did a lot of studio camera work, and some work years later, I was doing the same camera work underwater using my scuba license to do work underwater and get paid to do what I loved, which was fantastic. But I was also active in workplace reforms for women in those places too. You know, I was often in what we call non-traditional roles for women, but I could notice there were a lot of work conditions that were very archaic and, you know, needless to say, patriarchal in lots of respects. So I worked very hard on some of those issues when I was there in those early years. And then travelled to the mainland again in the early 70s and went to WA, your territory there, Sandra and Carol, and I worked on kangaroo, rabbit and dingo management research. And if anything, rabbits don't work 9 till 5. So that was very, very interesting 4 years involved there. And I've been actively involved with Amnesty International since the mid-70s, where I'm not sure if you know, but we had to personally handwrite letters to many world leaders on urgent human rights matters. Carol's nodding. You remember it well. So yes, I've been sort of right there for human rights and equity issues for a long time. I then trained and graduated from a teachers' college, and my first posting was the Kimberley School of the Air. And I'm not sure Carol and Sandra will know, but Western Australia is a very big state. And essentially I taught students who existed on ranches, basically like cattle stations, and they were only 40 students over 500,000 square kilometres. And I was often travelling to see those kids, and in doing so saw some of the most magnificent land, including world biospheres. And all of this enables me to sort of capture and want to fight for what we, you know, could lose with climate change. And I taught at a district high school involving Indigenous children, and spent many times going bush with Aboriginal elders and their families in remote areas of the Kimberley, learning about country. So then I returned to Perth, so bear with me, this is a long journey, where I was a science coordinator across the grades at the school I taught in Perth, and I devised programs that address gender stereotyping. You know, for instance, I did Lego Technics programs across the school for girls because they were not engaged in that, but in a scientific and technical sense, I employed the Lego Technics across the school to sort of counter some of those equity issues. I also had a tinkering box, which it was a positive reinforcement strategy, which countered gender stereotyping using beautiful, wonderful scientific gizmos and whatever that reflected a science principle or operation, and also just rewarding that kind of independent learning and turning around gender stereotyping. And then in 1988, I joined the Gender Equity Unit of the Social Justice Branch of the Education Department. And one project that we managed to do there is Science is for You video for girls. That was to try and encourage them to see all the different roles you could take in science for women and that was quite a successful project. I also met Alan Carman-Brown, my First Nations Heritage Canadian soon-to-be husband, in 1988, and he was working in State Planning Commission in Perth on climate change back in 1988, and he was very keen on doing that. But we were both so disheartened over time when little action was taken up in real legislative action. So yeah, we've noticed that over all these years. But when we travelled overseas, we offset our carbon emissions by going to New Zealand and planting trees. We planted 1,000 trees over time with a team. We also got the Qantas Tasmanian Native Forest Protection Projects, which preserve large areas of land in Tasmania's Central Highlands to protect habitats of Tasmanian devils, wedge-tailed eagles, eastern quolls, and have since used green offsets for that too. And we took sustainable living trips to the Centre for Alternative Technologies in Wales, Findhorn in Scotland. They were out there in the 1990s, and we learnt a lot from that. Then in 1991, I was employed for 10 years at SciTech Discovery Centre in Perth as a primary education officer for school visits there. And during that time, I taught teachers how to teach great hands-on science from Esperance to the Kimberley and from Kalbarri to the Goldfields. So I was employed by the education department to do that, which was absolutely fantastic, often going back to territories that I had previously lived. And my Tinkering Box program, which I offered to the schools, was also taken up by those schools to do the gender equality offsets. And also too, it was even taken up by the University of Southern Queensland to put in their undergraduate program, because it has this science and addressing gender stereotypes. So that was a great success too there. So directly or indirectly, I trained 40,000 teachers over those 10 years, and I hope that gender equity message rubbed off a bit there. So after 10 years at SciTech, I applied for a Discovery Centre Manager position back here in Tasmania in Devonport. And the Devonport City Council employed me to set up a science centre in northwest Tasmania, which was called the Imaginarium Science Centre, which ran over 10 years. And I applied for Federal Science Week grants every year to run environmental programs, which I got money for, and biodiversity, endangered species, polar regions projects, sustainability, oceans, water conservation, all of those sorts of issues I featured each program each year. And I joined Zonta in 2002, nearly 20 years ago, and currently the Area 5 Director, as you know. So now I'm back in Tasmanian's Greens heartland and politically active in climate change policy and community activity. I was even at a school strike action yesterday in Burnie, so on the strength of that, I came flying back. So yes, and then to deal with ocean health with rallies like the Dead Sea March, native forest preservation, etc. And on a personal level, I endeavour to practice sustainability in all I do, water conservation, storage tanks, recycling, composting, using produce bags, obviously, reusable carry bags at the supermarket, plastic-free purchasing wherever possible, and minimising carbon emissions by having multiple purpose trips, carpooling, walking to the post office to collect mail, etc., minimising energy use of heating and light. My electricity bill this month was $0. So I felt really happy about that. And I attend repair cafes and trade table markets, recycling clothing events, and I'm converting my front garden to native that completely relies on rainfall only. The federal election preparation and Zonta gender inequality issues are what I'm really focused on now. And I love that my two passions of gender equity and climate change action dovetail so well with my current roles.
That's
But
brilliant, Vicki. That is brilliant. Well done.
Lovely. There you go. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea, but you can see over time it takes a long while to actually show what we can do. But we're hoping with the restoration of Lake Pedder that can also demonstrate to the world that we can reverse a lot of the things that we have had happen, and would reflect as a symbol of hope for climate action. Thanks.
That is brilliant. I always thought you had a lot of things going on there, but I've really got to grasp now. You understand so much about the Australian fauna and flora and culture. You are such a resource. Within our think tank, part of what we're trying to do is just to find out what the resources are that we have. And you are a gem. Thank you so much, Vicki, for sharing. I'd like to, that's brilliant. As time's rushing on, I want to move on to Bronwen to talk about her role in what she's been doing with local government. Are you there, Bronwen? Yes, she is there. The photograph here of Bronwen actually riding her bicycle 2,000 kilometres to raise money for charity a few years ago. So she's always been a bit of a mover and shaker. Are you there, Bronwen? Yes, she is there. Good. Over to you, Bronwen.
Thank you, Carol, for this opportunity to talk about one of my passions. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Djadja Wurrung, on which I'm speaking from today, and I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Firstly, a little bit of the background about my climate change journey. I grew up on a cropping and grazing farm in north central Victoria, and we were virtually self-sufficient. There was no garbage collection service and everything was recycled, and we rode our bikes nearly 3 miles to the local primary school. Earlier, in June 2020, I was amazed when Liz Arnott and Brian Canty from Ringwood North in Melbourne announced in The Age they were putting their garbage bin out for the first time in 12 months. And this was what motivated me to produce my 5 R's of waste management: reduce, reuse, recycle, rethink and repair. My 3 brothers are still farming around the same area I grew up in, and I've watched on as their farming practices have changed in response to changing weather patterns and increased scientific knowledge of the younger generation, my nephews, such as reducing the number of times they turn or disturb the soil, changing the way they carry out burns, growing an increased variety of crops to improve soil, and planting more trees to prevent erosion. After school, I chose to go from farming to pharmacy, and my pharmacist training and career has further educated me in the problems with changes to our climate and how policy inaction threatens Australian lives. The thunderstorm asthma event in Melbourne in November 2016 was a particularly scary event for Melbourne-based health professionals. Additionally, the Black Summer bushfires of 2019-2020 were another call to action, particularly the breathing difficulties many experienced and the need to stay indoors. Increasing summer temperatures are of concern for the vulnerable who cannot afford to install or operate air conditioners and may suffer heat stress on extreme heat days. In 2018, I was given the opportunity to undertake the Loddon Mallee Community Leadership Program, and this gave me exposure to the First Nations people who have had a dialogue with nature for tens of thousands of years. And I learnt their way of thinking, that humans lived on the land, but the land also lived and breathed inside us, and there was moral reciprocity to this relationship. And after the May 2019 federal election, I think Tony is still listening into this.
Hang on, we've gone quiet. Hang on. You've muted. It was all right.
Yeah,
I was doing something.
I don't know.
Accidentally muted you.
Yeah. But,
Sorry.
anyway, Tony, a local retired teacher, was extremely concerned about climate change and how it would impact on his grandchildren. And he decided to act decisively and set about holding a climate action rally at our local resource centre. He joined forces with the Goldfields sustainability group, necessary for insurance purposes, but with members basically on the same journey. And he was going to be happy if 50 people turned up, was delighted when 250 attended. Speakers were young and old and included a former resident actively involved in climate change in a neighbouring shire. The fire brigade also attended as they were aware of the increased bushfire risk. As a result of that rally, the Maryborough Climate Action Group came together with approximately 12 active members, including myself, as I was now retired, and COVID had prevented me from travelling as planned. So this group has met regularly over the past 2 years. We've delivered a request for a declaration of climate emergency to politicians. We've run media, public education events, come actively engaged with council administrators until COVID restrictions set in. We've lobbied all candidates who stood for our local council elections last year, with some success, we feel. We've run kitchen table conversations for our local Department of Water, Environment, Land and Planning, and Tony's been guest speaker at various community groups. We've made 2 formal presentations to the Central Goldfields Shire Council and to new councillors with a request for the appointment of a sustainability officer. We've identified an extensive list of potential local mitigation and adaptation actions, and we've partnered with the Central Goldfields Shire, Maryborough Education Centre and the Goldfields Sustainability Group to begin a collaboration to develop a community climate action plan. What would the group like to see? We'd like to raise awareness of climate change, energy and sustainability in our community education, ensure the elderly and the vulnerable are looked after, take advantage of renewables initiatives and schemes on offer by all levels of government, work with farmers to help make agriculture more sustainable, promote electric vehicles and charging stations, promote the use of trains, walking, riding bikes, and to become a leader, aim to become a leader, think big, take inspiration from Helen Haynes, the independent member for Indi. Let's not get left behind with benefits to the economy and jobs. So in July 2020, this year, the Central Goldfields community came together to develop a response to climate change in our region. And the Central Goldfields Climate Action Collaboration was formed. It's a community-led initiative initiated through a partnership between, as I said before, the Climate Action Group, the Sustainability Group, the Maryborough Education Centre and the Shire. A core team was established with representatives from all groups. Their role was to undertake foundational planning and continue to drive the project throughout its duration. And I'm a member of that core team. A design team, about 20, was formed from individuals in our community that the core team members approached directly. These people represent passionate residents, community groups, schools, business, industry and agriculture, as well as local health, emergency and community support services. And the idea was to the design team to come together over 5 3-hour workshops. They've been delayed with the restrictions of COVID-19 and the inability to meet face-to-face, but we've got another core team meeting on Tuesday to chart a way forward.
That's great.
Over the design process, it was intended this group will reach out to critical friends to gather further insights, concerns and ideas. And then we've got the planned major initiative to identify how our community is impacted by holding community climate kitchen table conversations. So they're primarily a listening activity, not debates or information sessions, usually involve 6 to 10 people, allocate 1 minute for each person to answer each question, require a facilitator and a note keeper to answer all the questions. And we intend to be asking 3 questions. What do you like and value about living in the Central Goldfields region? How do you see what you value being impacted by climate change? And what can our community do to strengthen and protect what we value?
Wow.
So, that's the journey for the Central Goldfields Climate Action Collaboration so far. We still have a way to go with several obstacles upsetting the planned pathway. I have found getting involved in my local community very rewarding and would like to recommend it to all if time allows. In our shire, our knowledge workers are drive in and drive out. So we are short on community members with skills or the desire to take on leadership positions. But I keep in mind a saying, decisions are made by those who turn up. So I turn up and I hope to have an impact on increasing the climate change education of our community members. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Bronwen. That's great. I think you've inspired a lot of us to see what we can do with our own communities and just to step up to actually take a role. That's just brilliant. Well done. Would you mind if people had any questions, if they came to you by email afterwards and just emailed you if they had any questions about your experiences? Because time's pressing on and I just, I would don't want people to miss out. Sandra, was there anything that you would like to say quickly to the group before we go on with regards to post-convention? Post-conference, sorry.
Post-conference, I'd just like to say that the session that you ran with 1 million women and of course with the group from Bendigo, just forgotten their name, Sisters?
Sister Works.
Sister Works. Quite a number of clubs are planning to, you know, make contact there to carry that on for sustainable products and also working with migrant women. And I just want to say I grew up in Central Victoria, so I'm very proud of what you're doing, Bronwen, and I think it's fantastic. And I did grow up on a farm, and I do see all those discussions about changing things on the land, etc. So I'm really proud of what you're doing there and how you're involving people in the Maryborough community. Also, that we've had a lot of response from members who initially, when Carol started this Zonta Says Now, saying, what's that got to do with women and what's it got to do with us in Zonta? But now they've really come on board, and I think having that at the conference and having these meetings has made a big change in for us around climate and around gender equity. And I want to say to, we have some international visitors, if you've got somebody in your Zonta world who has some ideas, just give them a go and let them flourish. And that's where we've got this from. And I have to thank Carol for all of that. You've got to give those enthusiastic people time to develop all of these ideas. So, and of course, we had one of 10 young women in public affairs winners here in our district, and very much a lot of what she was doing and talking about is climate action and what students are doing in her area in Ballarat. So I think that's good. And I like to see that in Maryborough, you're getting in contact with all your council. We've just had our council elections here in Western Australia. But remember, we are a political organisation. We're just not partisan. So we've got elections coming up across our, across Australia, and whether they're state elections or federal elections, we need to be asking those who are standing, whatever party they may come from, what are they planning to do and what are their ideas? We want to know about that. So thank you, Carol. That's enough from me.
That's lovely. Well, we're just into the home straight. Sandra mentioned about the Gender Equality and Climate Action Panel. And since the conference, 1 million women have putting the open letter to call for the Prime Minister to attend COP and reduce emissions by 50% by 2030. We've already got half of that dream come true because we now know he's going to COP, so the letters are working. So if you'd like to try and write a letter as well, join the campaign, you can try and push for that 50% as well. Sister Works now has its Christmas hampers out, So you remember they train women who are migrants, asylum seekers and refugees to make and sell sustainable, ethically produced foods and homemade body care products. And I know that her talk, as you said, Sandra, has really stimulated a lot of interest amongst clubs to see what can be done in other states. After the conference, I was actually privileged to be part of the Zonta International Women and Climate Change webinar, where they had an amazing panel of people. I felt very humbled to be part of that group. But what's more exciting is what's happened since. The following day, I had an email from a lady in the Bahamas, and then I've had communication with Isabel Ramil from District 14 Governor in Germany, thanks to Sandra putting us in touch with each other. I spoke with Nita McCowan in Toronto, who advised me that Zonta, the UN, actually now does virtual tours. So you can actually go online and go around the United Nations, which I thought was amazing, because normally we wouldn't get access to even going anywhere near the UN, being so far away. But I encourage you to have a look at that and follow it up. But the big one is this one. And this is, I just want to give an enormous acknowledgement to Angela Brokmann and Sheila Cook-Cohen, who have joined us today from the Zonta US Caucus. Now, these two incredible ladies, poor Angela, it's 2 o'clock in the morning or something ridiculous for her. Sheila, it must be about midnight for her, and they have both hung in there, which I am just absolutely amazed about. And I was going to hand over to Sheila to tell us a little bit about the USA Caucus and your climate committee.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. I think Angela gave up. She's 3 hours in front of me, and I saw she had a blanket on her shoulder, so yeah, maybe she was tired. She's a at-home farmer. She grows vegetables, and she's currently growing grapes. So, okay, let's see. I'm from California, and I've been with Zonta for 3 years, and I've never worked in a volunteer position at all. So this is really brand new for me. Some of it a little bit difficult because I'm used to coming from a capitalist type of organization where they're all about making money and not all about helping anybody, to being a volunteer. And it's great. I love it. And I think Zonta is a wonderful organization. I'll tell you about the caucus. Both Angela and I are district chairs for advocacy in our district. So it's a double duty type of a job that we have. But the caucus is made up of 13 women, one from each district, who vote on issues, campaigns, etc. And I'll give you a short, brief explanation of that in a moment. And what we do is we represent our district and we represent our governor. And ultimately, decisions are made by the governor based upon the input that we provide, because the governors just don't have the time to attend our meetings. It's that simple. So we are led by 2 co-conveners. I doubt that you know them, but I think you will get to know them. And we meet once a month. And while we plan on an hour and a half, it's usually 2+, as you probably well know. And what we do is we develop projects and campaigns based on the issues at hand. And today was all about climate change, electric vehicles, etc. In a lot of cases within the US, I just finished a UN meetings on water and irrigation and climate migration. And I did a tremendous amount of research. And so now what's going to happen is that research will be developed in a paper, kind of like the ones we did in college, right? And we send it through to all 13 or 15 of us. And then if everybody says, yeah, goes to the governor, and it still has one more step, and that is it has to go to Sharon. So, and potentially it could also have to go to the board. But yeah, it's good. It just gets your mind going very quickly. But we break out into 5 I think we're now 6 subgroups. We've just started to make change for the balance of the year. And you're aware of them, violence against women, education, yeah, I can't even think of them. I think my brain's going stale now. But the 5 that we're mentioning throughout your talk also. So with that, our groups are 5, each of our subcommittees are 5 people, and that's where the birth of a campaign begins. We get involved very much with the legislators. We are all watching what's going on in our House of Representatives and the senators to see what are they going to vote on next, or what are they going to not vote on at all. And we start to develop a program like that. So obviously politics is not different anywhere you go, right? So we have each of us have a 2-year commitment to this. And I'm into my 2nd year, but I don't plan on leaving. I really like dealing with the caucus, and you can see it. I can see it as I listen to you. It is so nice to be with intelligent women who think like you, who talk like you, and even if they don't think like you, they are still moving forward, and after your personal course, your causes. So we're hoping what we want to do is learn about the think tank, because there's some sensibility in our caucus group that maybe we're not doing everything as well as we could. And the think tank and what you do in the think tank might help us do a little bit of redirection or propositions for the future, etc. And I'd like to stay in touch. And I know Angela would when she wakes up. But and Carol, are you the individual to direct question? Okay. Yeah. That's good. But I am in the directory, the ZI directory, email, phone. I answer them all, so you'll always get a response if you have a question about what we're doing. I took some notes on the comments about the US, and that's a little bit bothersome, actually. So I'm going to try and get some information and feedback as well, but I'll go through Carol. I do want to say, while I've not been to Tasmania, I have been to Australia several times. And Perth is wonderful. And of course, it's because of wine, but but there's other things there too as well. So so that's where I'm at. Don't know if you have some questions, happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you so much for inviting me. And I'll say thank you on behalf of Angela as well.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much, Sheila, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And it's lovely to have that. We all breathe the same air, so it's lovely to have that sharing of everyone across the world, which is beautiful. I'll just
collaboration. Oh, sorry. Collaboration is the one word that Sharon's been using in all of our meetings. Brilliant. And it sticks. So sorry.
That's great. Well, I'll skip into some of the things that we've been doing locally, and I'll just go back into the screen share. But thank you so much for joining today and sharing a bit about the caucus. I'm sure we will meet again. Now, you're probably aware that the Zonta Club of Melbourne-on-Yarra had their Women Taking Climate Action Award. I'm going to call on Jasmine, if she's around, to tell us a bit about how that's going. Jasmine.
Yes, hello. So we, maybe just a little bit of background on the award, although I may have talked about it, or probably talked about it before. Sorry about the screaming baby in the background. We sort of the inception for this award came about, I think, around about the same time as the think tank idea came about, but very separately. So that was sort of a divine confluence of events. But we held a fundraiser last year where Natalie Isaacs from 1 Million Women spoke at a webinar, and then we used the money that we fundraised from that to put towards the Women Taking Climate Action grant. And because of the actions of Zonta Says Now, we decided to have that award open to not just Victoria, but all of the District 23, which ended up being a really great decision because we had some good applicants from across the country. And Sue, Lees and Carol and myself read and judged those applications and awarded a winner, I think maybe just last week or the week before, wasn't it? So we had applications from Victoria, Tasmania, Western Australia and South Australia, and we awarded it to Margaret Hender of Adelaide, who is, I might just tell you a little bit about her organisation because it's really interesting. So essentially, we were looking for someone anyone that was doing something innovative in the field of climate action. So we kept it very broad in terms of who was able to apply. And this was a particularly innovative idea, we thought, as well as having an impact and engagement with women. So the organisation's called Carina. It was founded in 2013, and it's Australia's first revolving solar fund. So basically, they pool small donations and then loan, rather than give away, they loan money to not-for-profits so that they can install solar or invest in energy efficiency. And they also offer independent technical advice and support to those organisations. So it hasn't been around for all that long, but they've already grown to a sort of $500,000, and I think they've lent $800,000. And so it's pretty, the growth, I think the idea is very innovative, and the growth over the last sort of 5 or so years was very impressive. And in terms of the engagement with women, essentially, Margaret was saying, first of all, that basically all of the key participants in Carina, all the major positions are held by women. And also because the energy sector is generally such a male-dominated field, but then the organisations that Carina lends loans to are often female-dominated, so NGOs, education, healthcare, that kind of thing. And so it provides a non-intimidating way for those organisations to engage with the energy sector, having women at the forefront. And I think we all thought that was, even though they're not sort of directly a women's organisation, it's clear the benefit that this organisation is having. So that is hopefully a reasonably clear summary of Carina, but it was difficult to judge because there was some really impressive people, and also people on various with varying experience and different places in their climate action journey. Yeah.
And I just add, that was a very good summary. It was so difficult that I have actually asked some of the women that have applied to speak to us in the future. So we'll have at least one of them has replied already that they're happy to do that. So there are some amazing women out there.
Yeah. Yes. It was very inspiring to see what they've done, and it was so different in age and where they are in their career paths, and what the breadth of what they've done was amazing. Thank you so much for giving us that update. Did anyone have anything else that they wanted to share from their clubs? Sandra?
Oh, not necessarily from my club, but it would be great, Yasmin, if we could have that information shared right across the district, and particularly if we could share that information with the Zonta clubs in South Australia, so they know about it. So Chris Frick is the area director there, but if you could write us a little report, I know Joe would love to put it out across the district, and we would love to highlight what you're doing there in our next news flash as well, so it goes to all the members across our district. I think it's fantastic, and congratulations, you're always a step ahead there in Melbourne-on-Yarra, I have to say.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yes, I'll do that because you're trying to study for your medical.
Okay. We don't mind who does it. That's good.
No, that's great. That's great. Yes, Tyrrell.
Yes, just very quickly, can you hear me?
Yes,
just checking. Okay, great. I have, as Area 3 Director, been asking all clubs to see if they can do what you had requested, which is to have a climate change champion. And pleased to report that in the Zonta Club of Bunbury, every month, we either have a very small snippet about something new in climate change action, and this particular month, we're going to have something up on the screen just to remind people of a new focus, so that every month we've got something new to focus on, with the aim of helping to reduce our carbon footprint.
Brilliant. That's brilliant.
That's the plan. Thank you.
Do any other clubs have that going at the moment? If not, they'll think about it. It's a good thing to do. Excellent.
Good idea.
Jasmine. I just saw Jasmine do this at the bottom of the screen there. No? Okay. All right then. I'll just move on quickly and to see where we are. Individual actions. Don't forget that you do things as a club, but also members can take individual action. I mean, in the last few weeks since the conference, this is some of the stuff that I've been playing around with. The mass mail out for climate action. I sent a letter to my local senator because I saw in the paper that he was going to COP26. So I sent him the picture of the train to remind him to think about gender equality. I said, please take this image with you. And there was the 1 million women, their open letter to get the PM to go. And also the Climate Council has a pledge that you can ask your member of parliament to pledge that they want to do something about the climate. And my member didn't have anything, so I suggested that he joined. And then you can also do things like, they say that taking action helps reduce climate anxiety. So I must have been very anxious to take all these actions. But I've also started growing mint for my own mint tea. So I don't use any tea bags anymore. So there's things that you can all do. There's also, so finally with other business, be aware that the improved climate bill is due to be in Parliament on Monday. And it suggests the emission reduction target be 60% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. And also TED's Countdown Summit is currently underway in Edinburgh. The COP26 is in Glasgow, but they're going to they brought all these people together from around the world, and the outcomes of what they've been discussing will be shared on a global live stream on the 30th of October. So that would be an interesting thing to watch. Another thing I wanted to share was that I've recently been doing En-ROADS training, which is a climate change simulator, a climate change solution simulator. And I'm looking for guinea pigs because I need to try my workshop. So if any of you would like to be a guinea pig to have a little Zoom session online to play with this simulator, I would really love your help so as I can play with a safe audience and try and get my experience up. It's a fascinating tool and it's a bit of fun as well. So let me know if you'd like to do that. Did anyone have anything else they'd like to share before we move on? Just you'd have to yell out and make sure your mute's off, okay? Well, finally, just when's your Zonta anniversary? Don't forget the endowment fund for the foundation. I always like to plug this because it's the way we're going to fund the educating girls for generations to come. And I always like to finish with a smile, and I've got 1 minute 47 seconds. This will just make you laugh. It summarises today.
Australia. We're an unabashed, honking mass of rev heads. Who doesn't love the romance of our road movies? But the story's changing. All over the world, it's a new dawn for the electric car. She's clean, she's fast, and she's getting cheaper by the day. The federal government needs to change gears on EV policy. So here's where the rubber hits the road. To reach net zero by 2035, we need to hit the brakes on emissions from transport. And EVs will play an important role. The rest of the world is speeding ahead. Norway is cranking with 75% take-up of EVs, while Australia is puttering along with less than 1%. America's busy exporting over $8 billion of EVs, creating millions of jobs. And New Zealand is revving up subsidies to help people pay for EVs and banning the import of petrol cars by 2032. But we're stuck in the slow lane. The feds aren't doing enough to encourage EV sales, develop infrastructure, and the best sellers aren't even available in Australia. We're becoming a petrol car graveyard, with manufacturers dumping millions of outdated models on the only global player silly enough to buy them, Australia. We need policymakers to put the pedal to the metal, lift the red tape, build the infrastructure, and get in the fast lane to overtake climate change.
Now, wasn't that fun? Got to get rid of it now.
Right.
Okay. So I thought you'd enjoy that one. And I think it summarises a lot of what Diane Kraal was talking about today. So the only thing that we have left is the next meeting. And I was thinking of having it on Saturday, the 4th of December. And I just want to know that we'll have the same time as today. It's a Saturday, and hopefully it wouldn't be too far into the Christmas rush, so we can have a bit of fun on that day. So if you can make a note of that in your diaries, 1 p.m. on Saturday, the 4th of December. So with that, I'll take off the screen share. Is there anything else that anyone would like to say before we close the meeting? I'd like you to know that we had over 30 people join the meeting on at the peak of it today, so that was amazing. And I'd like to thank you all for your contribution. It's been great. So until next time, get the pedal to the metal with regards to getting EVs on board and gender equality ramped up. So enjoy COP26, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll see Florence next Saturday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Bye.
Carol.
Bye. Bye. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Cheerio.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Tyrrell. Thank you. Thanks, Joe. See you later. Thanks, Jeanette. Thank you. See you later. I'll call it there.